This is Studio 809 Podcasts, informing, connecting, and empowering the residents of the Pikes Peak region.
Binlow Season 2 is sponsored by Blackpackers, economic equity in outdoor education and recreation.
This is badly needed and long overdue, a controversial podcast about Colorado Springs. It's controversial because it makes sense, and eagle-eyed listeners will know that I totally forgot that part in the last episode. That is trivia for y'all forever. I'm your host, Nick Raven. I'm standing in a field. Hopefully I got the shot right, and I'm not... I just did this entire segment, and I was too far to the left. I'm kind of zoomed in a little. And didn't know I'm doing this all by myself. This is a very independent production. And we're in it was just a shot, it was just a field of green with the sun kind of peeking in and out. So that was great. If you're listening, you have no idea what I'm talking about. And that's okay, I'm here to cater to everyone. So we've got a very well cut lawn. I wanted to get a little higher angle on it, but it's a little tougher than I would have liked. So anyway, what are we here? What are we doing this show for? Oh, that's right. We have congressional candidate for the Colorado's 5th District. That's Joe Reagan. And this is his second time at bat. He joined the race late last year, 2024. And he lost the primary against River Gasson by 500 votes. So he's running again. He's the only candidate in recent memory to run a second time for this chair. Usually people fail, especially Democrats who have a long shot anyway. They lose and then they give up, and then you don't hear from them again. They even move out of state. Wherever they go, you don't hear from them. So Joe's running again. The obvious disclaimer here comes that I work for Joe. I worked for Joe in his first run. As a designer, social media dude, social coordinator, stuff like that. And then this time around, they brought me on in a regular capacity to help as we move into the primary in next June. So we're still 9 months out from that. And then the general election following that obviously next November with the midterms. So this is a district that has been represented by Republicans since its creation. Doug Lamborn, who nobody liked except for, I guess, the Republicans who voted for him, was the representative for something like 22 years, over 2 decades. And then when he announced his retirement, the radio talk show host, Jeff Crank, I don't know if you guys know what talk radio shows are. Some of you guys do, I know. But he won the election last year against River. And so Joe and I get to talk about his policies, but we can also get to talk about what it was like to lose that primary and the meaning of what it's like to come back from behind, why he's into it for a second round, because this is something very, very, even though he was hesitant, this is something that he was very, very interested in doing. We have a lot of laughs. It's very fun, and you get to learn about Joe. So I want to let you know on the back half of this, though, stick around, because I'm going to soapbox about the pedestrian tunnels that we have here and just being a pedestrian in Colorado Springs, period, because it's kind of a big deal. And being where I'm at, you get to see one of the tunnels that they built for it. So let's talk about that in the soapbox afterward. Until then, let's pay the bills. Let's go to the ad break. Off we go.
The Nth Review. Do you like video games? What about multi-hour deep dives into how video games work? Of course you do! It's time you come check out what 22,000 other subscribers have already discovered. A whole bunch of delicious content about mechanics, immersive sims, action games, open world stuff, and why we play and enjoy games in video essays you can cook dinner to. Check it out at youtube.com/Nth Review. And be sure to check out my newest review for Deus Ex Mankind Divided, a revisit of the classic immersive sim, coming out soon. If you'd like to place an ad on Binlo, send an email to badlyneededpodcast@gmail.com and get your business, campaign, or message prominently featured on this beautiful, glittering podcast. Now, onto the conversation. Hello, Joe Reagan.
Hello. You look
Welcome
very serious.
to Blair. This is how it always starts. So it was funny. I was actually waiting for you in the elevator earlier because you said you're walking up, and I thought like maybe you made it to the lobby, and you had. You just gone in a different direction. So I was waiting for the doors to slide open and be like, "Agent Regan, we've been waiting for you," and you weren't there, and you were just around the corner. I couldn't do anything like that. It's like, all right, you know, it's fine.
Do you want me to go back outside? We can try it again?
We can later.
Okay, later.
Okay, let's put that in the time budget.
Okay.
Absolutely. How are you doing? Why do you assume? Does everyone assume that you're Ronnie's grandson? I'm Joe Reagan, and just or Joe Rogan.
I'm
getting
the Joe Rogan a lot more now. When I was growing up, it was always, "Are you related to the president?" And now I'm getting, "Oh, I thought you were Joe Rogan."
Yeah. No.
That one's very frustrating for a number of reasons. One, because I'm not Joe Rogan, and two, I don't want to be Joe Rogan in any way, any sense of it. I know,
but Joe Rogan of the left. That's what everyone's looking for.
Well, maybe we can go that way. But then let's go back to then. I'm just going to be Joe Reagan. Then.
How many silverback apes could you tackle right now, bare-fisted Joe? Is it 1.5? Like I know.
I don't even know how to answer that question.
All right,
you got me.
That's good.
We're not even starting, and now I'm already speechless.
Yeah, see, there you go. We're knock you off guard. That's right. How's the whole running for Congress thing doing?
I have to say, people always will come up to me and they'll be like, "How do you? I don't know how you do that."
First off, they're coming up to you. How do they know you're? Do you have you have your button? You have the name.
Sometimes I have the button, but I mean, one of the things. And one of the reasons I felt like I was able to get such strong support quickly in the last cycle
is you glow.
No, because I've been involved in the community.
Yeah.
And so people know me not as being a congressional candidate. People know me because I'm part of the local Rotary Club. People know me because they see me at Little League games for my kids or the soccer games, or they see me at PTO meetings and that kind of stuff. So when people know you, and then all of a sudden you've brought yourself out there and say, "Oh, and by the way, I'm going to do this thing. This is the next step for me."
Yeah. Then
people start asking, and that's the question that comes up, because a lot of folks that I know, they don't know they're elected officials. They haven't had a chance to meet with them. They don't engage with them.
Mm-hmm, right.
And so they have those sorts of questions like, why would you do this? And my response is, which is actually surprising to myself, because I did not want to run for office for the longest time. I was being involved with the nonprofit space. That was really where I found my passion of being able to support the community. Mm-hmm. And so when I ran, I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed it. And it was because what it forced me to do, and what it forces, I think, hopefully anyone to do, is push beyond the existing circle of folks that I was working with and engage in other areas of the community that I hadn't previously done before.
But isn't that kind of scary, like a trap you can fall? It's like, I love running for office, but then maybe you win and it's like, oh my God.
I think the trap is when you get stuck in... so the people that I met with aren't necessarily people that are going to donate to a political campaign.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, like, for a great example is here in Colorado Springs, there's an organization called the Homeless Union. Mm-hmm. And this is a number of homeless individuals that have come together to advocate on their own behalf. Obviously, these are people that will not donate to a political campaign.
Yeah.
But I sat down with them and spent like an hour just trying to understand the issues of what is it actually like to be homeless in this community? What does it look like?
Yeah.
And their requests were remarkably simple. It was like, well, listen, we understand that some homeless people are destroying our parks. They're doing these things. And so what we want to do is we want to publicly and openly engage in cleaning up these parks. Yeah. And in return, we'd like access to the bathroom.
That'd be dope. I say that as an able-bodied white dude.
Yeah.
It's like, I just want somewhere to be.
This is an example of where policy, when you sit down and actually talk to people that are having an issue and say, hey, everyone in this community wants to talk about housing instability. We want to talk about housing prices. We want to talk about homelessness. And the solutions to that often benefit all of us, right? Because like you said, as a 40-year-old man, I like having a bathroom nearby.
It's dope.
As a parent,
heckin' dope.
As a parent, having a bathroom nearby is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And so,
but that's a money thing in there too.
Well, but if you have this volunteer force that is now willing to contribute to do these sorts
like
of things
that.
because they recognize the fact that they are stressing out some of those systems. And the funny thing is they even recognize the fact that one of the barriers that they have to escaping homelessness is finding jobs. Because if you go to the bathroom outside, I don't know if you know this, it's illegal. And so now, if you're caught, you're now into the criminal justice system, and that now is created a barrier for you to get a job, which prevents you from gaining sustainability, which then prevents you from actually getting out of homelessness. And so we've created this vicious cycle over a small thing of public bathrooms.
Yeah, why can't we be more like the French and just urinate publicly?
That would be one solution. But then we'll have all the jokes about being like San Francisco and the issues that they're running into.
Yeah, that's so. When you were 5, when you were little Joe, were you like, when I grow up, I want to run for the 5th Congressional District of Colorado? What did you want to do?
No, when I was 5, I probably wanted to be a fireman.
Okay. And I was fighter pilot.
That's
so
it was one of those things.
Yeah. Both have planes, I think.
No, I think probably the first time I was really serious about pursuing a career was at going into college. You waited that long? You were like high school, like I don't.
Well,
what do I want to do? But high school was formative. Where in high school I had so you might not know this about me because I know
this is the part about we're revealing all the secrets.
I've become known as kind of like I was the serious candidate, and which I find really funny because in high school I was a complete screwball.
Oh,
and
I've taken you cookie shopping.
And it's like I was saying, I had extra cake today, so I'm nice and sugar high. So going into college as a screwball, I actually chose to go to a military school, and it was a private military school, so there was no military obligation.
Why?
Because I saw the structure that was going to be offered in the military school as the one way that I was going to make it through college. Because otherwise, I would be focused on having fun and not my studies.
So, okay, so you're basing this on fun versus studies. That's what your career is.
Well, what I wanted to do, I had a great social studies teacher in high school, Miss Olson, and I don't think she's Miss Olson anymore, but that was kind of that moment for me. It was like, I want to be a high school history teacher. That's what I want to be.
All right, there we go.
And I was convinced this is what I was going to do. And so I was a political science major, and again, it's a military school, and I was in military school when 9/11 happened, and I was actually on a mountain rescue team that was at the school, and so we were part of this whole broader enterprise of like suddenly every person with any small amount of skill like myself that could be used to help in the rescue efforts in New York, they're suddenly like, get ready to go.
Yeah.
And it became very, very real in that moment of exactly what was happening. And what I found, especially being on that campus and starting to see friends that were graduating and going off to Iraq and Afghanistan, that they would then, that kind of was like, no, I think this is where I'm supposed to go. And so that is when I made the decision to go into the military. So when I left college, I wound up becoming an infantry officer in the Army. And then the Army officers are kind of a unique track. They need a lot of junior officers to be in those combat focused roles.
They need a middle.
Yeah. And then in some of the more, so like in military intelligence, for example, they need people with experience. And so I went this route where
in military intelligence?
Well, not all of us. And so I went, and my first deployment over in Afghanistan was as an infantry platoon leader for 16 months. And then when I came back, I took over the intelligence shop for the battalion. And then when we deployed again, ran the intelligence operations for our unit. And then I got to do some fun stuff in DC and did some of that cool guy stuff for a while.
So let's roll back. When you were being called back to New York City,
did you
actually go?
No, we did not.
We did. Okay.
No, we did not.
I was gonna say.
Nope. But it was, like I said, it was one of those moments where you're having people like you're part of this conversation now of, hey, we're
this
really
is a global thing.
And for me, I'm looking at this, I'm like, really, you're going to call a bunch of college kids up from Vermont to come back? This is where we're at.
Yeah,
this is part of the solution, which is kind of unnerving sometimes. But that was how fragile, that system was at the time. That they really needed everybody they could get.
Yeah,
to be part of the effort.
For that, because that was a huge thing.
Yeah.
Yep. They had to. So you're like, well, all right. This is a global thing. I'm going to get into intelligence out in the fields, military.
Yep. And well, yeah. And
did you have someone who was like angel devil, like, yes, Joe, go for it. It's for your country versus, oh my God, you've got college coming up.
Well, actually, I'm going to take it back to the question you asked about Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
Because in Afghanistan, the Afghans were a big fan of Ronald Reagan.
The
Mujahideen.
Yeah.
And so I actually had a lot of interactions with former Mujahideen commanders, and they would see my name tag, and they'd be like, "Oh, well, you're really..." I was like, "Yeah." Great nephew.
Yeah.
I figured great nephew was just far enough away that nobody could ever
go.
prove it, but then it was also, you got that street credibility.
Of
Now
course,
suddenly
right.
they want to work with you. They want to talk to you. And that's really what it was all about, was for us, trying to make those connections, because it was a very confusing environment, and my job, and I think my experience in the field was very helpful because, I'd seen it firsthand. I'd been in these places. I had worked with what the tactical units needed for information, and then be able to feed that back and guide my team in making those sorts of assessments. And then when we got up into a kind of a more strategic level, same thing, keeping that, how is this decision, how is this analysis going to drive actual operations on the ground, not just policy, but operations on the ground too, in a very practical sense. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of conversations, is we like to think on these very high levels, but then we never really get a chance to get down at the weeds and say, how is this actually going to impact somebody when you get down to the person that has to make that decision in the moment?
Because that sounds like supply chain management to some extent. Like, you could go into DDC at Walmart and be like, I'm making these decisions, because so many veterans come out and it's like, what am I going to do? I was a paratrooper. Like,
it is funny.
I know you've had plenty of transition anecdotes and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and so I went in. So
you're young.
I'm young.
You're getting into this.
I get into defense contracting, which was good. I enjoyed that, and I actually did a lot of work looking at emerging technologies. So that was my role, was to assess emerging technologies. And it was about this time that we started a small business, and that convinced me to go back to school. So I used my GI Bill to go back and get a master's degree.
What was the business?
It was actually a kids consignment store.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was a fascinating experience to start up a small business from scratch, and really just, how do you market it? How do you come up with this idea? How do you price things?
Yeah, because you have to, there's all the market stuff, but then you're also wearing all these different hats and going through all of that.
Yep. And so then the interesting thing is, going through this process as a small business owner then encourages me to go back and go back to grad school, get my MBA. And the natural course for any MBA is, well, you go do consulting.
Yeah.
And so got to work with, Fortune,
McKinsey's and all that.
Yep. And I got to say, I learned a ton, but it was a miserable lifestyle. Like, absolutely just
living out of
not just living out of the suitcase, but the profit orientation of a lot of clients, where, you would come on these projects and be like, oh, this is kind of really cool.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it would really come down to, what are the dollars and cents?
That was, so I did corporate work for Best Buy for a very brief time. I bring it up because, that was one of the cooler things I did when I was there, but it was there. So Best Buy corporate campus is like 4 sand crawlers from Star Wars. They call them the crawlers. And one of the towers, at least back when I know they've tried to get rid of a lot of real estate because of post-COVID, work from home, all that stuff. One of their towers was Accenture. And so basically, there were so many decisions that came out of that company because of consultants. Yep. And then when Pete Buttigieg goes up there, it's like, I know who the fuck you are, dude. I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I know. It's the dollars and cents. It is the min-maxing of this and that. And it's, as you say, the profit motivation, uber alles,
And what's scary to me sometimes, too, was that so often they were using consultants not as an opportunity to find insight into their own business, but really justifying the decisions that they'd already made.
Yeah.
And to me...
Oh, God, yeah.
And that's really frustrating, because, again, as an outsider, sometimes it's good to have an outsider come in and look at your organization and say, hey, what can we do doing better?
Yeah.
But that's generally not how a lot of these companies are utilizing consultants, and say, hey, we already know what we're doing. We just need someone outside to come verify that. We're going to pay you a lot of money to verify what we've already discovered.
Right. We want to lay off 30% of our workforce and blame it on AI.
Now, thankfully, I was not a slash and burn consultant.
Okay.
I was actually focused on the growth side. So how do we expand revenue? How do we build into new markets?
There's still not saying you were, but
I was not. Yeah, that was thankfully not something I would have to do. But anyways, during this period, I found myself working in the nonprofit. I was volunteering for a nonprofit, and our director left to take on a new project. And so the board comes to me and they're like, "Would you be interested in taking on this role?" It was a veteran. It was a it was a veterans nonprofit focused on veterans affairs.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I think I would like that. And that really got me down this role of advocating for veterans, their families.
When was this?
This was 2016, 2017 maybe.
Okay.
And, now I've worked for a couple of different nonprofits that have focused on everything from, like I said, veterans affairs, but getting into substance misuse, healthcare, early childhood development. Mm-hmm. And now as a business guy, I'm not a clinician, so I'm not in these programs providing care.
Yeah.
But you learn a ton about how this system works.
That 20,000-foot view.
Well, and so to bring it to a modern issue, when we look at the Medicaid cuts that are going to be occurring here in the next 2 years, right? That care still has to be paid somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's going to fall back on.
Or it doesn't, and people just die.
Be. No, it will. Remember, when you walk into the hospital, they will provide a certain standard level of care for you.
Yeah.
And that money comes from somewhere. And that's what is missing from this equation is like, hey, if you put somebody on Medicare or Medicaid, then they have access to preventive medicine. So we're actually going to spend less to make sure you stay healthy.
Yeah.
Generally.
That's how they figure out in other countries too. Yeah.
It's amazing how it works. Now, if we push someone off that and say you can't get preventative care, then you're going to show up to the emergency room, which is like 3 or 4 times more expensive.
Yeah.
Just by nature of just showing up. And you're going to have worse outcomes.
Yeah.
So you're making the problem far worse, far more expensive, and that money either is going to come from and you're already seeing this in California, you're seeing this here, where private health insurance premiums are getting pushed up because it is ultimately the private insurers that will actually have to supplement the lost revenue from the Medicaid. So if you are on private insurance right now, you're going to see your rates go up.
Sure.
Because otherwise hospitals will start closing, and that's when we start running into
the rural hospitals,
especially, and they are already struggling. And this is something that I've dealt with through my nonprofit career: is how do we deliver care to rural individuals? How do we make sure that we're getting access to that, fair access to that, good access to that?
So how do we get to Medicare for all, which I know is your favorite term?
I think more importantly is it's got less to do with who's writing the check and answering the question is why is the check so big? And that's really what it comes down to is I think that there is a place for private insurance in a fair marketplace. But
that assumes a fair marketplace.
And that's the question, right?
Yeah.
So go back to why is that check so big? And then let's diagnose those issues and address that. Because we can write a check to make sure everyone has access to healthcare. That's actually a fairly easy part of this. But addressing the underlying issues of why is cost so high? Why are we paying so much for prescription drugs? Why are we not getting more involved with preventative care?
Right.
And looking at other therapies. And so, for example, as a veteran, my health care is paid through the Veterans Administration. I get 100% health care.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, I had high blood pressure and a severe amount of stress. And so my doctor, well, and the funny thing is my doctor immediately wanted to prescribe blood pressure medication.
Yeah. And I'm totally used to that.
Yeah,
yes.
And I'm 35 years old. And when you get on some of these medications, you can't come off them. It changes the way your body functions. And so once you are on some of these medications, you cannot come off. Mm-hmm. So when you think about that, if you're putting a 35-year-old on medication that they're going to be on for the rest of their life, that's hundreds of millions of dollars guaranteed.
Yeah.
And it was a really funny conversation because when I switched my provider and I told them, I haven't taken any of those meds. Mm-hmm. And the doctor looked at me, he's like, well, he's like, I'm going to tell you as your doctor, like, please always listen to me. You should always listen to your doctor. He goes, but in this one particular case, he goes, it was probably better that you didn't take that. And he goes, can I hook you up with a dietitian? Mm-hmm. Said, yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah.
And so I sit down, I had like 3 or 4 meetings with a dietitian at a total cost of probably, let's call it $500. And that's being probably generous as to what they're paying a dietitian, to relook some of the dietary choices I was making. And by implementing that into the diet, blood pressure comes down, no drugs, right? That's preventative care that's focused on better outcome with less cost. Mm-hmm. And this is when we start talking about like social determinants of health. It's something that's missing from the broader part of this conversation. Is there's so many choices that we engage with on a daily basis that can lead to better health outcomes that aren't being addressed.
Yeah.
And
that's a societal thing. It's like, don't make the crap food so good and make it more available. And then also,
that when you get into the culture wars of let's remove soda from SNAP.
Yeah.
Like, is that really where you want to go with that? Like,
right.
Is that what we're going to spend our bandwidth on?
And that's exactly. And I think that the better choice is let's address the harder problem, which is how do we increase access to fresh whole foods?
But how do we do that in a way? Because the problem we're seeing right now is that, all right, you go out for that care, but they're for profiteers. They have their so you introduce this new frontier of we need to focus on this. Here come new profiteers because we have profiteers in the old space. They're just going to make everything else that we want to make good bad on it. So it's one of those like half measures when conservatives come and they will fund they will vote along outside of what they would normally do. They'll half fund it, half implement it, and then it's like, oh, it didn't work because we half-assed it. Amnesty in the 80s, that kind of thing.
And this, I think, is fundamentally a problem with the way that I think too often we try and find that perfect solution right off the bat, as opposed to recognizing the fact that, hey, situations change, the conditions are going to change. And so as someone that wants to go to Washington and be a legislator, right, it's not, I'm never going to be able to come up with a perfect solution, but let's keep trying to figure out how we can make it increasingly better along the way, because we can't just sit there and say, well, we're not going to take a step forward because it might not be the right step.
Perfect is
we've got to continue to move forward at a steady pace and make those incremental improvements along the way, and that's on any policy area. That you need to be looking at those ways,
like high-speed rail along the Front Range or something. We were talking like we're not getting maglev,
right?
We're going to use existing freight lines and stuff, but that's better than nothing. Paris and bike lanes, paint just. Put some paint down. Well, and get some places where people know where they can take their bikes.
Yeah, well, and we've talked about this too. Of when we talk, Front Range Rail is the big project, but when we go before that too, also thinking of how do we engage at the community level. And this is not necessarily the congressional level. But how as a community do we start to come together to build that multimodal system out? So that Front Range Rail is running effectively. Because believe me. I used to live in Boston, and there was nothing better than getting up in the morning, walking a mile, getting on a train. The train would take me into Boston. I'd walk another mile and I'm at my office.
You're there.
It was lovely. And on a Friday afternoon, I could stop and get a beer, and I get on the train, and no driving, no traffic. It was lovely. But if you look at, and I talk to folks like in Fountain or out in Falcon, and on these outlying communities where they don't have access to. Or even where I live on the southwest side of town, that it's really difficult to get access to our public transportation network. And so at a local level, and a lot of that will be enabled through federal grants, hopefully, not this year, but how do we start to bring those into play so that we can create a system that is going to be functional for everybody? There's no reason it should take 3 stops for someone to get from Fountain over to downtown Colorado Springs.
No, and you get two or 3 bus stops in there. But to your conversation about food, I think every time I go past a food pantry, I think that is a thing that is providing a need. But then I also go back upstream. Like, gosh, what if there was some sort of, I don't know, like a card or something that you could give to people where they could just go to the grocery store in the first place and not wait for the charity of secondhand goods to arrive at this other place where then they capture whatever that. It's kind of a perverse incentive.
Well, and remember that right now what we're seeing too is cuts on both ends of that. So not only are you seeing the cuts to the SNAP benefits, but you're also seeing cuts. So for example, Care and Share Food Bank, they just took, I want to say it was a $1 or $2 million hit to their program. And so they're
just grants.
Just for grants. And they're now going to see not only the increased need, because now our SNAP folks that were utilizing SNAP
their
no longer have access to that,
and
it puts that problem back onto the community, and the community does not have the capacity to handle it. And so you're right, and this goes back to, and I wish I brought figures with me, because you can actually
just grab an easel and some charts, put it right here.
This is what people need. What you never see about me is the fact that I will have these conversations, and I will go back to my office and I will sit there and be like, I wonder what those numbers look like. And when you look at SNAP, especially, making that investment in SNAP is, think of it in terms of return on investment, right? We're providing this resource so people have access to healthy food, and the return on investment is quite high. And this is where, and here's a great, this is a better example, and I've kind of memorized this one, but for social determinants of health. So in a rural part of the state, there was a client, and this individual was identified to the organization that I worked for at the time as spending far more on healthcare than any person reasonably should.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
And so the program that we were running was a pilot to say, hey, you're outside of, the insurance company has a number for you. They know what you should be spending on healthcare based on all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
And so they said, can you go out and talk to this person, see what's going on with them? And it turns out that they couldn't pay their power bill. And because they couldn't pay the power bill, their insulin supply went bad. And they couldn't afford more insulin. So then they went into diabetic shock. And because they were in diabetic shock, because they were in a rural community, it required a life flight to get them to the level 1 trauma facility they needed to save their life. That's $1 million. $1 million. Do you know how much the power bill was?
It was like not much.
35.
Yeah.
$35
million. But 35, yeah.
And that's an example of, and the funny thing is that the solution to this was, well, there was actually an existing program that provided rural customers with a buffer, so if they couldn't pay the power bill, then
like LEAP.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Those sorts of programs, that's where that cost savings come in. You're paying $35 for for the power
electricity.
bill, for electricity, so the refrigerator stays on, so the insulin supply doesn't go bad. So now we don't have to do the life flight. And that's that return on. It's really hard to track. And
but that is like a communications. Then the power utility should have been like, hey, we see you're behind on your bill rather than shutting you off.
Yes.
Here's this alternate program.
Yep.
Maybe they sent a mailer about it because most mailers are garbage anyway. But
well, and if you're in
not yours, Joe.
Thank you. And if you're in a rural part of the state too, chances are that mailbox is not going to be at your front door.
No, it's down a driveway.
It's down a driveway on the main road.
Yep.
And so again, if you're a diabetic, you probably have mobility issues.
Yeah.
All these things start to build up, and you're realizing, wow, these things are. And here locally, recently, in fact, just the other day, there was talks of a $2 million cut to the housing voucher program. Mm-hmm. And so we have a community here that one of the biggest issues that we face as a community is housing and homelessness.
Yeah.
And you and I had been to number one of all the mayors' out briefings, and that was consistently came up, right? What are we doing about homelessness?
And how much people cared or not.
And how much people cared. Well, they cared about the issue. It was the NIMBYism kind of played into where's the solution go?
Yeah.
And
not here, obviously. Yeah.
Well, that's and that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
That's a conversation for the city council to have when it comes to zoning. But the money that goes into that, and one of the things that funded was a consolidated intake process. Mm-hmm. So there's a number of different nonprofits that work locally to support our homeless population or housing, those that are struggling with housing.
Westside Care, Springs Rescue Mission,
and they all talk.
Some of those.
They all talk. And the idea was, you never know where you're going to encounter this person. So, and if anyone's ever been to, a health clinic or one of these areas that's providing services for any number of reasons, chances are you're going to get asked about your housing status.
Yeah. And
the idea is when we ask you that question, if you say yes, well then suddenly now we can cue in all these resources to come in and support.
Yeah.
And and what we need to do when we think system-wide, how do you structure these processes so that so people don't fall through the cracks?
Right.
It's where are all the touch points that we can engage with someone to identify that the fact that the power bill is not going to get paid earlier in the process so that we can get proactive with that.
Don't mind me.
No, I'm not. I'm just, I wasn't sure if you're trying to go for sound effects.
I was like, I keep feeling that. It's like getting my beard right up against the mic. It's kind of cool. So we're identifying the problems here, but then the solution is, okay, how do we thread all those things? How do we take the money on that? And some of it, I'm sure, is tied to what can I do in Congress? Mm-hmm. And Joe, I have something very profound for you. Yes. If pro is to con, what's the opposite of progress?
It is, in fact, Congress.
Okay.
Well, and if you look back at
my dad would be so proud.
I've heard that one well, but it's true.
I'm ready to glide right on past. Let's go.
But if you look at the past like 4 or 5 Congresses, mm-hmm. they've been the least productive Congresses in the history of.
I know we got all those potholes still.
The potholes. Oh, the potholes. But but there's, and this is the thing, right? So what is it in Congress that can be used to support these types of programs?
That's a good, because when you even start to understand the shape of the cheesecake, it's like this part is local. This is the city, and people don't understand that they don't even live in the city, so they're mad at the city when they should be mad at the county. The county, and then CDOT with the state and stuff like that. That's been a state problem for however long. Mm-hmm. And then where do the feds come in? Well, they subsidize some of the transit, stuff like that. So then you have to wonder, how do you, Joe, personally take care of this.
Well, so
do you need a cape?
I might.
Okay.
Not because it's going to help me, but just because I would just feel really. I would make me. It's like that power stance, right?
No,
I'm walking
it
around
is.
with a cake.
Don't go up near the airplanes, though. You will get sucked in.
That would be bad.
Yeah,
that would be very
There'd
bad.
be one less Joe. Anyways,
so when you look at the main area that Congress can get involved is through grants. Mm-hmm. Right, authorizing these funds.
Right.
So when you look at these programs, like our housing programs, when you look at our veterans programs, at the state and local level, many of those are fully or partially funded through federal grants. Mm-hmm. And so when we look specifically at, for example, the dismantling of the Department of Education, that is significant because the Department of Education is the principal way that we fund money into our communities to make sure that they're being used for the right thing. So especially,
you mean corrupt kids with wokeism? Is that what I'm hearing, Joe?
I would actually. Well, you know what? Yes, I know where the joke was going.
Culture wars.
Culture wars.
Let's go!
No, but the real challenge is that the value add by the Department of Education is around specifically children with disabilities and making sure that school systems are properly resourced to make sure that every child, no matter what zip code they have, has access to a quality education.
Especially when they're based so much on property taxes, funding them and stuff like that.
Well, and that's where the federal government can come into play. And this is the ultimate irony too, is when you think about it, right? So the federal government uses those grants to say, hey, if you're in a well-off community and your property taxes are funding your schools, you might not necessarily need as much grant money.
Right.
But if you look into our rural areas that are struggling with that, where you don't necessarily have a large population of children, you probably especially don't have a large population of disabled children.
Right.
You might be looking at spending a very large proportion of your budget on
edge cases,
on a small number of cases.
Right.
And so the federal government can come in and help those communities support that. And by drying up the federal Department of Education, right, that process is not going to be in place anymore.
So what's going to happen?
What they say is that the GOP, Linda McMahon has come out and said, "Oh, we're going to." I can't.
She's going to come out. There's going to be pyrotechnics and stuff. We've fucked everything up.
And it's a play towards the libertarian side of both parties. Both parties have a libertarian kind of component to them. And it's a play to those libertarians. Oh, we're going to give it back to the states. If we don't have a federal Department of Education, then the states will be able to manage it.
Not recognizing that some states are getting more out than they're paying in.
And what's the ultimate irony is that if you look at them, again, stupid math, man.
I know.
Stupid
numbers
math.
are dumb.
They're dumb.
What if we replace them with letters? Oh, that sounds terrible, actually.
But so when you look at the numbers at the states that are
struggling,
net consumers, we'll call them net consumers of tax dollars.
That's a very diplomatic term.
They are very red. They are very red states.
Yes, exactly.
And then you look at the states that have the lowest performing on by education standards. Again, it's your Mississippi's, your Alabamas, your Arkansas' of the world. And no offense to
Wyoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, your California's, your Massachusetts. And this is the funny thing. People say, well, our school system, we're struggling against the Danish and these other European groups. I say, well, actually, if you start to break out by state, Massachusetts, California, Colorado, are competitive with a lot of these states because they are making the investment. Now in Colorado, we have a lot of room to make some improvements there.
Yeah, and TABOR, and that's a whole.
Well, that's a whole different story. I'm not even going to touch that one because that is you can talk about, you can bring that up with the state reps.
God, that is. Yeah.
But what I would say on the TABOR piece, I guess, is
that's right. Crack that walnut open.
Yeah,
there's a chestnut.
It's about communication. Right, and this is where I think Democrats get a lot wrong, is how they engage voters on these critical issues, because and it's you see it coming every time. Anytime a Democrat mentions TABOR, the Republican, well, you want to kill TABOR.
Exactly.
As opposed to, and then
the
when
safeguard of our state constitution and our way of life.
Yep.
And crappy roads.
And then when the Democrats get up, what they have to then explain is the fact that, no, it's not about getting rid of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It's about addressing a very complex formula that does not account for the inflation that Donald Trump caused over the course of both of his, the first administration, Trumpflation was huge.
Yeah.
And then his overspending that he did with he's one of the least fiscally responsible presidents
but
ever.
That's also a matter of some things you just can't tie to inflation. Yep. It's like, what if you had to start...
you start a business, right? You're growing and growing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you say you can't take any loans, you can't acquire any debt to. It's like that's not how that works. Sometimes you need the money now, J.G. Wentworth style, and to pay for the thing that is going to matter 5-10 years down the road. And then tied with that, this idea of you're not losing money by doing this thing for the public good. It is you're going to get 10, 20 multiplied off that on the end. But getting that across is really hard because we're the only state with TABOR. And it's suffocating us, even though our state is successful and growing. It's all Polis's fault, apparently.
No, it's like I said, it's a very complex equation that fails to account for the way that inflation drives up the cost on these programs.
I would expect nothing less from a felon slumlord. So I mean, that seems to be a common thread. So
it's true. Yeah, that is very true.
Debrief it. Let's go. Anyway. So you decide to. Why do you decide to run?
Why did I decide to?
Why do you decide to run for the opposite of progress? Like I just want to put the brakes on everything.
I think anyone's worked in a nonprofit sees this, right? And in the nonprofit world, so often policymakers want to come in, they want to take their happy snap, and so as a nonprofit leader, you're in this space where you're engaging with policy officials. And I'll be 100% honest with you. It really came to me. I was like, these people aren't that smart.
I've heard that. But some of these people that are in charge, maybe not the brightest bulbs, don't know everything.
And the worst part about it is because it's not necessarily about intelligence.
No.
But even worse is it's about perspective.
Yeah.
And where are you driving your decision making from? How are you informing yourself about these policy decisions? And I, as a nonprofit leader,
Fox News, of course.
But even on Democrats, right? Even on Democrats, sometimes we lose sight of the fact.
Both-siding this. What are you doing?
I am both-siding this because I think you have a lot of policymakers that, they want to just immediately assume things are correct as opposed to going down to and in the nonprofit world, it is the space where policy is meeting the roadway. Yeah. Right? We are putting those things into practice, and we are the ones that can tell you right off the bat why things are not working. Mm-hmm. Right? Our housing voucher system is far from ideal. Right. That doesn't mean you cut it,
or it does.
But see, this is an example of this was the overreach of there's a small amount of corruption here, so let's cut it.
Yeah.
Or there's a small amount of waste.
There's one person's doing it wrong. Yep. We have to affect 100 other people. Yeah.
And then you look at the return and as opposed to when you look at the return of how this will operate effectively, and you're like, no, we're getting actually quite a large return on investment from these social programs.
It's economically better when people have homes.
Here's one that came up the other day. So in my current job, I do a lot of work with economic development. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the child care crisis here in El Paso County. And I can't remember. I wish I remembered the number off the top of my head. But there's a very large number of children that are currently sitting on waiting lists for childcare. Mm-hmm. And as I thought through that problem, I think of, all right, if you have 10,000 kids that are
That's a lot.
It is a lot, but this is the number. Mm-hmm. It's not exactly 10,000, but we are talking a very large number of kids.
Yeah.
It is an equal number of parents that are not in the workforce. And if they're not in the and that's also, so if you go back to the math on that, right, the law is in Colorado, you need 1 teacher per every 10 child. If it's in a mixed use facility, 2.5 years to 6. So 10,000 kids, that's 1,000 teachers that you need to hire to provide care for those kids. That's a lot of jobs that you could be creating. And now those parents are working as well. So now you have 10,000 more people in the workforce. You have 1,000 more new jobs providing care. And how much is that revenue, right? At $18,000 a year average cost of childcare, that money is coming into return. Now, what we haven't addressed there is how many people have to make the decision of they can't afford $18,000 in childcare costs. So now they are not in the workforce, not because they're on a waiting list, but because they can't afford childcare at all.
Yeah, right.
What's that number?
Yeah, I remember USAA. It would be. It was one of their benefits. You could spend most of your paycheck putting your kid in their exclusive daycare, and that's great. I'm sure if you're like C-suite in the building or something like that, there wasn't any C-suite in the building, but it was like if you weren't making this 6-7 figures, like who can afford that?
Right. Well, and the real life impact, and I use my sister as an example of this. When my nephew was born, my sister was a teacher. And the challenge that she and my brother-in-law faced was they simply, like the cost of childcare exceeded the salary that she was making as a teacher.
Yeah.
And so now the decision was made as a family. Well, she leaves the workforce to stay at home because it was the more economically smart decision for them to do that. And now you have an educated woman that could be filling a critical shortage that we have in teachers that is out of the workforce because she's been priced out of the workforce because she can't get care for the child.
Sounds like the invisible hand of the free market doing its job there, Joe.
But this is where those certain, but this is the thing. When we talk about programs like free childcare, that's where let's talk about the return on that investment and go back and say, hey, we're creating jobs by doing this. We're creating multiples of jobs. And the math on it, I think it was like a 237% return on investment.
But you can't get there if you have people who don't believe in what you can't even fix my potholes, Joe. And you're like, you're gonna the government's gonna take my child care or the payment of it. God, I was on unemployment for however long last year, figuring all that out. Like, come on, Joe, what are you gonna do for me? And so it's like, this is all practical and loving and well thought out. But then it's like, oh my God, you've got to encounter the person who's like, I don't trust this thing that's supposed to be a public good that I've delegated tasks to. That's like, how are you going to do it?
This is where
the interstate highway system was 70 years ago, Joe.
I know. And I think portions of 25 haven't been paved since then.
CDOT, there we go. Let's talk about TABOR again. That was a good rest stop right there.
Well, and here's a challenge that you run into. And I think that on both sides, there's a huge loss of trust that has occurred between those of us that are electing people and those that are elected.
Right.
And I'll tell you the biggest concern I have about this election is, so many Democrats are talking about the fact that Donald Trump's approval rating is like 30%.
No one cares.
And the figure that no one is acknowledging is the fact that the approval rating of the Democratic Party is 20.
Yeah.
And why is that? When you look at the challenge is that the policies that the Democratic Party are bringing forth can do more to support the majority of Americans than anything the Republicans have offered them in 100 years.
Yeah.
And why are we not being able to connect with those voters? And it comes back to trust. And I think that that's something that, again, as coming from the nonprofit space, when people see me around town, and you asked this question before we were on air.
Yeah.
Right. How do people know who you are if you're not wearing your little, my little name tag?
You've got a little exclamation mark.
It's because people met me before I was a political candidate. Yeah. And they've seen me in other capacities of, no, that's Joe. I saw him at the food distribution event. He was handing out food boxes. Or I saw Joe at the Little League game. Please don't tell me
you were like chucking paper towels at a crowd.
Actually,
No, Joe, that was not the
No. So I have, if you don't know, it's about Mount Carmel Veteran Service Center. Every year they do a giant food give back around 9/11. In fact, it is coming up again this year. It's on the 12th, I think. And I want to say it was either last year or 2 years ago. Robert Irvine came and he was the guest speaker. And so
Who's Robert Irvine?
Well, he's a celebrity chef.
Oh.
And he's also
I knew that.
the foodies that are listening, they knew who Robert Irvine was.
Matt Schnipper will know.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm just literally handing out boxes, like this big pile of boxes. I pick up a box, hand the box to the person, they go off on their way. And next thing I know, I turn around and there's Robert Irvine standing right next to me. And he's like, pick up the pace, man. Pick up. And I won't even attempt to do the accent, but those that know, he's got the very thick British accent. You could do
literally any accent, I would believe you.
And it's a British accent. I'm not going to try. I'm only going to embarrass myself.
Joe Reagan, get to work. Toss those boxes.
I had more respect for him at that moment because he was not just there for the photo op.
Okay.
He literally sat there and he and I packed boxes for an hour together.
Dope.
But that's that's what's missing is so often you see these politicians that will show up, they'll take their photo op and they're off.
Yeah.
And it's staged, it's inauthentic, and people see right through it every time.
Yeah.
And if we really want to, it doesn't matter, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, if you really want to represent your community, build the trust first. Because that's where it's going to come from. And I think that you're seeing those shifts that are occurring nationally. Because I think people are fed up with both parties, and they want less about, am I for this party or that party? Who's the person I can actually trust? Who is the person that's actually going to think about this in terms of how does this impact my community? How is this going to help me?
Well, and that goes back to like, okay, you can have an event, but it's like, what if I just went to King Soopers and just bought the stuff myself? I just had a boom, there we go, aha, it's paid. But and so I think I would say
Where's the nonprofit industrial complex and all this to come? It's like, look at all the good we're doing on your taxpayer dollar, you know? To say that, like, I mean, chances are you're already in an industry or something like that, and it's like, I'm here to save the day for you because it's divorced of the government doing it itself. Yep. And that's its own thing as well. That's kind of a libertarian perspective. It's like, let the free market compete for grants and they will distribute. Care and share, another, you know.
And I think just like anything else, there are places where we've seen a lot of where nonprofits overreach. Yeah. And you have some nonprofits. So like my first job in the nonprofit industry was with Easter Seals. Been around for 100 years. They were the one, that was the organization that wrote the Americans with Disabilities Act, and which fundamentally changed so many aspects of how we live. And so there is a space for what's happening with the nonprofit world.
I agree. I agree.
But to go back, and it's the funny thing is that it's the same argument I would have used 10 years ago to criticize Republicans whose response to every foreign policy issue was, well, just send the military. We'll just send SF. SF can figure it all out. And that's, you know, whereas as opposed to, we have all these tools.
SF.
Special Forces.
Oh, sorry, Special Force. Astronauts just come in from the space shuttle. Is that how that works?
That's how it works.
Is that how Space Force works?
That's how Space Force works.
They didn't retire the shuttles?
Boots on the moon.
There we go. Missile Command. It's real.
It's real.
It's real. You only have 3 bases, though. Burp. 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 Anyway, but special forces are the universal.
And now we see that the Republican answer to everything is, well, the charities will take care of it. Yeah. And they don't. They can't.
But that's been a hyper local. I mean, not to tangentialize here, but like that's been like Mayor Souther's big thing. I think even maybe to an extent is just let the public-private partnership 5 times public-private partnership. Nope. Let them solve it. We'll give them some portion of the money, like some new group got in charge of City Odd. Good luck, guys, raising that kind of money for a public good that we've been deferring on for 1 billion years. Yep. Sorry, most of a century, and that. But yeah,
and this is where a lot of that creativity gets missed. Of like, oh well, public-private partnership. That must be the answer to everything. Well, no, it's not.
No,
and
sometimes you have to own it.
You have to
bring it to your chest.
You do have to own it. Yeah. And there are certain areas that the government does better. There's certain areas that the nonprofit and private sector do better. And that's just reality.
Like civilians manning the gates at bases. Like what?
That one is... Anyways.
That's what you're going to fix day one. So you decide to run for Congress. Why, when, and how? How was that?
So this decision would have started.
I know you came in a little late.
I was I think the last one to enter the race last cycle. Yeah. And I would say the decision, I was asked directly in November of
by Mr. Government, Uncle Sam.
Yeah. No, it was a political organization I'd been working with that was looking to recruit more moderate candidates that could flip red districts specifically. And I had been working with them to recruit down ballot candidates here in El Paso County. And part of that was to try and identify, can we find somebody that can actually flip this district? How do we do it? What does that person have to look like? And the more and more we looked at it, and finally about just before Thanksgiving, the leadership team was like, hey, have you noticed that all the things that you're telling us, like you check those boxes, like you really should consider making a run for it. And so use that week of Thanksgiving to kind of reflect and think about it. And that decision was made
down the hallway.
It was. I do. If you ever want to see me, so this was funny. So when Doug Lamborn was in office, the joke was, if you wanted to see Doug Lamborn, you had to go to the El Paso Club, because that's pretty much the only place he hung out in town. And I would tell you that if you want to find me, pretty much any day that I'm working, you will find me about midday walking downtown
or running someone over with your Jeep.
Well, that was a one-off. That's just because I didn't like the person.
We'll keep that off the record. Maybe we'll see. No, but you're around.
Well, and that's yes, and so going through that reflection process, saying, okay, you know what, maybe I should think about this. I'd been asked to run before. I'd been asked for, ironically, I was asked by Republicans to run for something too, for a down ballot race, and I was like, no, why would I do that? I was like, you clearly don't know me.
Yeah.
And yeah, ultimately made the decision early December, and then announced early into January of 2024 that we were going to do it. Mm-hmm. And I got to say, I am so proud of the team that I brought together, which included you.
Yes.
To be
and
able,
I did make this disclaimer before in the bookend before we started the show.
Yep.
Weeks ago.
Well, and it wasn't just people that were,
Weeks
working full time on the campaign or part time on the campaign. It was just, so many people got behind me so quickly.
Yeah.
And it was surprising even to me to think, because when we had the conversation, it was like, hey, if you're going to really win a district, you really do need to run 2 cycles, because people need to get to know you. They need to see you. There needs to be name recognition, and it just doesn't happen in the course of a year.
No, I remember even in advance of that run, it was you had one candidate in, they were in for one race, they're out. Yep. I remember David Torres in the cycle before. He's like, I'm going to do it from Lakewood or wherever. He was on the show a couple years ago, and he was out, and it's like, or they're running out of state or something like that. It's like, yeah, it'd be cool if someone stuck around for a minute and tried again.
Yep. And
we're inching just ever closer to something like that.
Well, I mean, and you go back to, I'm not going to lie, like financially, it is very difficult to run. It is hard. It is expensive, not just in terms of getting the right people around you, but, the cost of, there's only so many jobs that I can take. And right now, you look at my schedule right now, I'm probably working 60, 70 hours a week because I got a full-time job during the day, and then I come back, and then I've got podcasting.
Yeah.
Well, actually, this I'm kind of,
8 hours of
don't tell anybody, I might be sneaking away from work right now.
This isn't the past.
This is the past. There we go. So no one needs to know what time this is.
What day is it?
And then spending the evenings, making those voter outreach calls, making those phone calls, going to all kinds of different events on the weekends. And it is. But again, go back to the weird part about me is that I've really enjoyed it because it's put me into so many different parts of this community that I wouldn't have done otherwise.
Yeah.
And I'm walking away, if nothing else, always feeling like, hey, I feel more connected to this community than ever.
Yeah.
Because of running, because I've been able to engage with so many amazing people that make this community what it is.
Yeah.
And
now you ran against in the primary. This is where you ran into your stop.
Yep.
And if you hadn't run, River would have been my candidate. Like, I love science too. Bill Nye, all that stuff. Yep. She's a great lady. And I know that right after that, you grew your hair out, grew the beard, did the braids and all that, got the hemp vest and all that stuff, had your journey in that. And I know you've been in and around seeing stuff and doing things. So so obviously you take your month off crying, obviously, and you're that wasn't, I mean, it could be any act.
So it was funny because
we didn't watch to lose
every summer I take a week-long camping trip with my 2 sons. And usually it is the week my youngest son gets back from his summer camp. And so we'll go pick him up, and then we'll go on the camping trip. Yeah. I don't know why he wants to do 2 weeks at summer camp and then suddenly go on another camping trip. But either way.
He'll grow old.
Yeah. So when, because the way the primary was structured, he got back from camp mid-June, and I was like, buddy, is it okay if we push this a little bit? Because I really do need to be out about. I can't be absent during this period.
Yeah.
And he was fine with that, and so we scheduled this great trip
on my birthday.
I know the day. And so if you recall, because you were there, that my car was literally packed that night, because as soon as I woke up the morning after the election, we got in the car and we started driving up to Glacier National Park.
Yeah, and that's when you digest.
It did. It gave me time to digest. And again, with the people, I was with my kids.
Yeah.
And it was...
Distract me, please.
No, it wasn't distracting. It was a reminder of why I did it in the first place.
Okay.
Of saying, hey, this is what it's all about, right? I'm not in this for me. I'm in this because I want to make sure that we're creating a community in a country that they can grow up in. Yeah. And that my grandkids, if they choose to have grandkids, can grow up in as well.
Right.
And that's what it's all about. And it's not it really shouldn't be about winning or losing. It's looking at all the good things that came out of that. It's the good things that came out of that. Because ultimately, when I got back and got more engaged and started to support, I was very supportive of other Democratic candidates, to include River, during that race. made a lot of really strong connections. And then that kind of fell into this role of, hey, we have this program that is struggling. And it's a big program that we need someone that's a strong leader to come in. And it was kind of a trade-off. Like, hey, we know you're only here for 2 years, but can you come in, take this program on, turn it around?
Because you'd already decided, like,
I already knew I was gonna run.
legally, like, you weren't.
Yeah.
Or were you? I don't know.
So
I'm
yes,
not a
I think
lawyer.
the FEC filings were in to run. Well, I waited till after
June
the election,
27th.
but filed.
Okay.
You have to amend your candidacy forms.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was in.
Amend forms.
It's very bureauchrist.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yes. So I knew I was in.
You know you were in.
I knew I was in, and the realist in me knew that the unfortunate reality is that that River was not able to build the coalition needed to recruit independent voters to come over and defeat Crank.
Because that seemed to be the theory, was that Dave Williams was such a repulsive candidate that the people who would have voted for you went and took their ballots and said, we can't have Dave Williams winning on that other side, because ultimately he can still win the seat.
And down
he
ballot.
probably will, actually.
And down ballot, too.
Yeah.
And I will say, and this is, it's funny when people say, well, why do you think it's going to be different this time around? How do you think you can win this time around? And
Sure.
I said, well, probably the most painful thing for me was when somebody would come up to me after the race and be like, Joe, and this is a direct quote. This is not me being arrogant, but direct quote from somebody that said, I'm an unaffiliated voter. I was going to vote for you. I saw your debate performance. I thought you were a shoo-in. I had to vote the Republican ballot because there were too many legitimately crazy people on that ballot. And the only competitive race on the Democratic side was the congressional race. And so I think that's a call for action on two different levels of, hey, we should be driving a robust conversation of all races within the Democratic Party of let's encourage competition, because if we really want to give people choice, let's be the party that provides them with that opportunity to make some of those choices.
Right.
Because on the Republican side, so often it's just become, hey, we've got different flavors of MAGA.
Yeah.
And guess what? They all taste like crap.
Yeah. That's going on a bumper sticker.
It should. That'd be a good one. Maybe that's the campaign slogan right there.
Yes.
As opposed to the Democratic Party, which has always been kind of that big tent party of how do we build a coalition? And in this community, we have a really good opportunity to attract a lot of those unaffiliated voters.
Yeah.
And those unaffiliated voters are the core constituency of the Democratic Party. These are middle, working class Americans with families that really just want their community to thrive.
Yeah.
And when we address them where they're at, and we meet them where they're at, we make that case and say, hey, we're here for you. And I go back to, my grandfather, that, he was a lifelong Democrat. And his saying was, and it's the easiest way to describe what is the difference between a Democrat and Republican. Well, my grandfather would say, well, the Republican is the one that gave me my job. It was the Democrat that gave me my rights. And that, to me, is a very powerful statement of really who are we as Democrats? And it comes back to that statement of, hey, we're the ones that are protecting the rights of every American, whether it's Fifth Amendment rights, whether it's your right to work, all these different things. And that's probably not the right way to say that, because when I say that, I'm talking about supporting unions and their ability to stand up for workers to make sure that every American has access to a fair wage.
Yeah, and worker protections,
and worker protections and all these things.
So,
absolutely, yeah.
But instead, Polis is trying to build a $25 million bridge to nowhere.
Well, at least I think that one got.
No, he did a poll. And everyone was like, no. I voted no. Why would you do that? Just diet the road.
I still couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't figure that one out either.
That you just need paint.
Just paint. A little bit of paint.
I mean, you need some really good paint. Like
it's just good. We should. You and I should go with some spray paint.
Yeah. So that's the Strong Towns approach, is just go out there in the middle of the night with some...
And just do it.
And just do it. Like, haha.
As long as we look official. We just need some hats and some yellow...
vests. I guess. Or just do it. So, how's the field looking? I heard one of them still taking off the parachute.
I think...
Joe, you're so nice.
I'm trying to be. I really am trying to be. Because I really don't think a lot of this comes down to, it's less about the person and more about the underlying systematic issues that we're running into, right? You have a consultant class in DC that has this vision on how things happen and how things work. And it's fundamentally wrong. It's disconnected from reality. And so what you saw this last cycle, right? Last cycle, the Democratic Party at both, the state party leaders, they loved to talk to me. They were very nice.
Oh,
but they didn't do anything to support these races.
Yeah.
The National Party wanted nothing to do with this race. And now suddenly someone has made the assessment of like, oh, well, we think we can flip this race now. So let's put somebody in here that we think can make it. That we think.
The people in the back rooms and cigars and
you know,
because that's how it used to be. Like before there was.
And look what that did. And this is the problem. Is like, these are the same people that totally messed up the 2024 election. Right? At the end of the day, they refused to listen to voters. They refused to listen to the people in the communities, and they ignored candidates like me that could have flipped this district and delivered the House victory. They could have prevented a Trump presidency. And because of the decisions, because the way that they think is so removed from the reality of everyday Americans, that's why we have a Trump presidency. And now we're seeing it again, where they're going back and saying, "Oh no, we can do this. We just gotta flip out the personalities, put the new person in place."
Yeah,
and I think that is a scary trend nationwide. And I will say that one of the challenges that you run into is, for many of these consultants, money is the measurement.
Cash rules everything.
Cash rules everything.
Yeah.
And the reality is, and I think we saw this during my primary, right? You can't buy El Paso County. You need to build the trust. And if you have, and like I said, I am, to be honest, I am not worried, because I look at it and I say,
okay,
you
bold
can't,
statement.
You can't buy trust.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you're going to look at where people will see right through all the inauthenticity, all the other things. They'll see candidates for who they are, where they come from, and more importantly, who they surround themselves with.
Yeah.
And so I go back to the fact of, think about, and it doesn't matter, any race, not just me. Who is this? Where do I see this person, and who do they surround themselves with?
Yeah.
And because for me, I look at that and I'd say, listen, PTO meetings, kids' sporting events, the local Rotary Club, nonprofits.
But again,
that's where you find me.
So that sounds fantastic, Joe. But then you do have these institutions that are like, ignore that part. This is where our money is.
Yep.
So even if they have never seen, they haven't seen a human child in 30 years, where that's the one. Do you want to be aligned with us or not, Joe?
Yep.
Step in line, Joe.
Well,
Joe.
It was funny. I have a neighbor of mine he's a Republican.
That seems statistically likely. Yeah.
It is. But yet, nevertheless, we're neighborly, we're friendly, and we have conversations from time to time.
Sure.
And he said, it was funny because he was Air Force, and he goes, the problem is, once you get elected, you're just going to become a pawn of the party. He goes, that's just what happens. You get elected, and suddenly you do whatever the party tells you to. And I said, and I used his name. I was like, honestly, call anyone that I have ever worked for in my entire life, and they will tell you that I'm the biggest pain in the ass, because if I don't think it's right, I don't do it.
Because it's easy when you go from one theater to another, your new theater, you start adopting their language and you start working. So because then you gain the most traction with how they work, that suddenly you don't realize that you've forgotten how the world was before.
And that's why it's so important to go back to, who are the folks that you surround yourself with? Because we can sit here and we can talk about policy all day. At the end of the day, I'm running to be one member of Congress, and the influence there is actually is pretty minimal.
Yeah.
Yep. But how I make decisions, how I inform myself about issues, I think that is the question that we need to ask more policymakers about, is not necessarily what are the policy issues that are important to you, but how do you inform yourself? Where do you go for these answers?
Yeah.
And for me, when I surround with the people that I surround myself with, again, those nonprofit leaders, those community leaders, those folks that are actually on the ground that see this, my fellow parents, that are seeing the actual challenges that face everyday Americans.
Right. So let's look at Let's say you get elected. Let's say you get through the primary. It's still some time out.
Yep.
Let's not do the Binlow curse already or something. It's like every person who comes on here loses an election. We are one for like, I don't want to count.
Well, remember we talked about this. We haven't put a time. Nobody knows when this conversation is actually occurring.
This is just airing right before the election,
or we could just we recorded it before the last loss. So I've already lost the election.
There we go.
So that was the loss.
There we go.
And now we're moving forward.
We can metagame this all day. So you get into the office. You find your office. I'm sure in that building. It's one of the many buildings. Like what buttons are you pressing? What are you writing? And why is it around diversifying our economy? Because for most of a century, the city has, and I mean, I'm here because of the military, you're here because of the military, and it's like everyone's wondering, cool, what happens when some spreadsheet goes wrong and all of a sudden we're affected, and not just military, but the entire cottage industry of like I hear so much from even previous guests on here. It's like, gosh, I didn't realize how military oriented. If you want to be a professional, like making a livable wage, you have to be associated with the DOD and stuff like that. So how do you get into that diversifying?
So one of the
economy?
One of the strategies that I think key people, so like some of your chamber leaders, some of the other folks some other policymakers have started to see is, how do we leverage some of those areas around DOD, specifically like cybersecurity? How do we leverage that portion of the defense industry to grow the technology side of our industry? And so when we talk about Space Command,
which has been back and forth, and it seems like he has not touched it.
I have not seen the order. I have been told that the order has been written for Space Command to move to,
because he doesn't write it.
Well,
I mean, that's the true of politicians at that level. It's like he's not writing the.
Well, and so there could be any number of things happening behind. But the bigger piece is, so when we talk about the challenge of Space Command, goes well beyond just Space Command, and it really is. There are new national security missions that will evolve over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. How do we start to capture some of those, and what does that drive our broader economy into? So when we look at areas like, so for example, like chip manufacturing, right? We know technology is going to be integral to so many different parts of these things.
Right, 100% tariffs.
Yep. Which
200%.
Which, by the way, is a tax on working class Americans. So
yes.
Remember, Donald Trump.
We know.
Donald Trump
we know.
has single-handedly, with the consent of Jeff Crank, has single-handedly raised taxes on working-class Americans more than any other administration in the history of the world.
What's Jeff cranking on?
Anyways, you see, you got to be careful. I can go down those rabbit holes.
You're the politician here, buddy. I'm just a podcaster.
So how do we take what we have? So like that's the first step. When you talk about growth, first, what are the resources that we have now that we can start making small investments to grow and diversify? And so like when we look at what are the areas of defense that are happening here, and in some extent up in Denver as well. So we see a lot of investment in the space industry. So we have, and there's a large and growing component of the space industry that we could start to tap into. So growing away from defense, and now how do we get into commercial space?
But very technical.
It is. These are very technical areas. When you look at satellite design, like these are things that we could be doing here, and to some extent, satellite design could be kind of a skilled manufacturing jobs that we start to bring. Can we start building these buses here? And then they go off to do whatever mission they need to do. Cybersecurity, and we did see the investment of the National Cybersecurity Center down on UCCS. Which of course has a defense focus. But what is interesting about that organization is that they are part of their mission is to inform private industry on cyber threats. So how do we now leverage that to make sorts of investments? So like the Catalyst Center, Exponential Impact, B-Side Capital. These are organizations that are starting to identify some of these upcoming technology firms that are trying to break into this space, but they also have a very clear private market as well. And so in the short term, those are the areas that you can take what we have, put that investment in to encourage the private growth as it grows alongside the defense growth. And then what are those other areas that we want to look into? So I think we all say, hey, it's Colorado, tourism. That should be a part of it. So and this was I was talking to the new executive director of the Colorado Springs Airport.
Okay. Yeah.
And I asked him.
He just started.
What's that? Yeah, he just started.
He just started.
Yeah. Well, and he was going through all these figures, but all the people that live around Colorado Springs that should be using Colorado Springs Airport. And I said, do you have figures as to how many people are arriving from Colorado Springs that aren't here? So this is their vacation spot. So for example, they measure that there's like 1.5 million people in the surrounding area that should be using Colorado Springs Airport because of proximity and those types of things. Yep.
Just right here.
What they call the catchment area.
Sure. Yeah, the shed.
Now we go somewhere, right? So when I leave, so for example, I have family out east. So when I fly to Colorado Springs and I wind up
in Denver,
in Boston.
Oh, okay.
No, ultimately Boston.
Yeah.
And so, so my destination is Boston, and I fly back here. How many people are coming from somewhere else in the country and flying to Colorado? They've chosen Colorado Springs to fly into to then start their vacation. What's that figure look like? Because when I think of a natural selling point, when I tell friends to come visit us, and they're so, oh, well, we can just fly. How far are you from Denver? Oh, we'll just fly into Denver. I was like, no, fly into Springs. Really? I was like, yeah. Because if you're going to go, if like you want to go out in the mountains, everybody complains, but I will. Yeah, I avoid I-70 like the plague.
But if you're a budget traveler, like a lot of them are having you go through Denver, and it's like you might as well just drive from there. But then, I mean, that's not even a conversation.
But this is one of those examples of, okay, so the problem that the airport now faces is how do we use that airport to bring more tourists into Colorado Springs with the case of, hey, you don't have to deal with Denver traffic. Right. We have a capacity. Now, there's a capacity limitation on that, right? We can only get so big.
Everyone, yeah.
But that's an area where we could potentially be making small investments to leverage tourism. Are you familiar with the LART tax?
Yes, I am.
You know that we have the lowest LART tax?
I do know that, Joe.
And and this is an example that we don't want to, nobody ever wants to talk about it. And it's like, well, if we just bump this up just a small amount, we could be funding all sorts of different cultural events.
Cultural events, parks,
which
all kinds of stuff.
Is attracting more people into the community.
Right.
We could use that to fund, for example, the Fountain Creek area, to make that more of a riverfront place. Yeah. We can do all these different things with making small investments to increase the tourism component of what we're doing.
And you say other people pay for it.
And other people pay for it. The people that are coming to visit pay for it.
Exactly. Those guys.
Yep. And then,
but that's a hyper local. That's like tapping on city council's shoulder and telling them to, hey, you need to start a bill.
I was out in Montrose. I was out in Montrose about 3 or 4 months ago, and talking to some of their economic development people, and they received a matching federal grant to do upgrades to their downtown area. And so if you go out to Montrose, it is a beautiful downtown. I mean, lovely shops, all the storefronts are like brand new, and part of that was funded through federal matching grant dollars.
Right.
And so if you look at that, where you could if you use the LART tax to drive up and make some investment, come up with some plans,
if there's a grant available,
and then you can find the matching federal grants. And you look at what like Bennett and Hickenlooper have done is they've gone out and I think Bennett just released, he had like 6 or 7 projects that have been funded across the state through the way that the congressional appropriations process works. Those are things that we can do where the federal government is supporting these local projects.
You mean big pork is what I'm hearing.
It is what it, but that's that's what it's
$700,000 for new storefronts in Montrose. I've never even heard of that.
But the return on investment in the community helps to drive that small business development. And again, I think that's where people get concerned with growth in this town is we're all here for a reason, because our community has a really just unique culture to it. Colorado Springs is different from any other place I've ever lived in my entire life.
It's very strange.
It's
strangely beautiful.
But in a good way.
Yeah, it's strangely beautiful. It's like Beetlejuice.
And how do we maintain that character?
In a good way.
And more box stores doesn't preserve character. So how do we support local small business and make those investments so that we're leveraging the technology? And that can be, again,
better urban planning.
What's that? Well, that's a city. You can talk to city council about that one.
I can. Yep, done. Yep.
But making those investments in the arts and entertainment, and that not only supports us locally that live here, but also again brings in those outside dollars. If suddenly Colorado Springs becomes that entryway into the Rockies, right? Yeah, Rocky Mountain National Park, super crowded, but guess what? 11 Mile. That's a beautiful place.
Mueller.
Yep.
State Park. You get all that. Go to Cripple Creek. It's really quiet.
And then I think,
gamble?
you look at, there was actually a couple of different novel renewable energy projects that were looked at on the plains.
I've heard that if you set up too many solar farms, you steal sunlight, and then there's no more sun in there. And people are really up on the infrasound on wind turbine, because my parents had a house built 25 years ago out by Callahan, and before that, there were no windmills, and then they added the windmills afterwards. Now you have these people, I got this windmill. The county just vetoed the Excel line that was, and we need electrical infrastructure to power. But people think that, it's Denver Green Energy.
Nope.
Trying to pipeline, have us pay for this, whatever their freaking aerials through us that we don't even take advantage of. We don't get to take advantage which Excel and whatever public. Anyway. But so people misunderstand power.
So go back to the airport.
Bitcoin,
Go back to the airport question, because the airport conversation was great, because the new director used to be at the Reno airport, and he was talking about parking. And apparently to park at the Reno airport is like $30 a day, but they have covered parking.
There you go.
All right, so this is an example of small investment solves two problems at once. So because of the industrial park they want to build out by the airport, they need more power out there. So they need to build it. They need a new power transmission set. Build solar panels over the roof.
That's big in Arizona.
It just makes sense.
It does.
It
exactly.
just makes sense.
Or you just boost multimodal transit and get people to use park and rides and shuttles.
Also true.
Stuff. And that helps that there's a new gigafactory out by there. Well, new in relative terms. But we're talking about diversifying. And some of those are definitely the short-term half steps of... okay, so you're doing more space stuff. All right, that's pretty cool. But we're not even recognizing even a higher minimum wage here and I realize that's not a federal issue, but it's also at the same time.
We look at the federal minimum wage, and
it's a little low.
Yeah,
you could bring that up a little, Joe.
Well, and we have to create space for those regional shifts too, right? If you look at how far a dollar goes in different communities across the country, it does shift, and so it does rely on, at some level, local governments also have to look at their own cost of living and make those additional adjustments as well, and you have to do that. And again, I think this is the fundamental difference between Democrats and Republicans. Is Republicans have fully embraced the Ronald Reagan trickle down economics of
welfare queen.
It's not even that. It's just it's literally welfare queen became a completely different animal. But under Reagan, it was more like, hey, we honestly believe that if we give rich people more money, then somehow middle class people prosper,
get propped up, right?
And it's like, well, now we have 40 years of economic data to say, no, that doesn't work. And in fact, when we reverse that and say, hey, when you invest in working class Americans, when you focus on the demand side of the economy, you see far more economic growth. And so it's less about minimum wage, but how do we make sure that we're investing in middle class jobs so that people aren't struggling? I was talking to a woman just the other night. She's 70 years old. She's on a fixed income, and she is legitimately worried that she's going to be able to make ends meet.
Yeah, that's concerned around a lot of people these days.
It literally, you go back to polling, and over half of Americans are worried about making ends meet.
Yeah,
half.
That's a lot.
It is, and it's really sad when you think of it in terms of why. And the funny thing to me is, even Donald Trump saw this. Of when he came out and said, well, if we added an additional tax bracket to those making over $1 million, that would balance the budget. You know what? You're not going to hear me say this often, but he's right. If we added an additional tax bracket for those making over $1 million, we could, in fact, balance the budget and not cut a thing.
Yeah.
And why not do that?
Because they don't want it. Because Citizens United says that's not how we do things in this country anymore. Do we even have a country in 4 years, Joe? Who knows? That's scary.
I'm honestly terrified to answer that question. And again, as a veteran, having put so much into defending this country, it terrifies me that question is being asked, and that we actually have to put serious consideration around, are we having a next election?
Right.
And is that election actually going to be fair? Because we're allowing governments like Texas to completely throw out the Constitution.
No, that's not even the feds. The president's just you can't. You don't have that power, and the Republicans are like, we agree, and the Supreme Court's like, we agree, and so it happens anyway. So, say you get into office, and it's like. Big Trumpy Trump is like, hey, Big Joe, I'm doing my Trump voice here, but hey, Big Joe, I heard you're really big in Colorado Springs. Want to come up to the fascist squad? Like, do you want to like talk it out, have a party or anything? Come on over. We can talk about whatever you're into. I'll just sit back and laugh. That's my Trump.
Well, if he invites me, if he invites me to a private island, I'm certainly not going to. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I went there. Yeah. For those that might not be quite as attuned, that was an Epstein comment. You're welcome.
Yeah. He'll never release it. He'll never.
And
is that HR 1? Is that release the Epstein files? But what even? Okay, does it even matter?
Was the Epstein files matter?
Yeah.
I think the victims certainly deserve.
I agree.
The people that abuse them to have their story told.
But have they already conceded? Like, no, that's just his flaw, among many.
Who, Trump?
Yeah.
Who, Trump's flaw? Oh, I think everyone knows that Trump is a deeply flawed individual.
Yeah, no, but like that's just one extra one. So we release it, and then like, it doesn't even matter. Is that worth the? Because I think that's the thing right now. That's what people are gaming for. But ultimately, he's going to get Gallup whatever he's going to awful things he's going to do.
Go back to trust.
Yeah,
and I think more than the outcome.
But do people even care about trust? Like, this dude is not very trustworthy. Joe.
Somebody asked me that question the other day, and I said, how do we convince this group of people, these diehard MAGA folks?
You don't.
And I said, and you don't have to.
Yeah, you don't.
In this district, in our district, I need to convince literally 8% of people to switch their vote over to a Democrat.
Yeah.
Right. That is a small, and these are people that aren't hardcore MAGA. These are people that are fed up with what's happening on the Republican side, and they need the Democrats to give them a reason and someone that they can trust to vote Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those people will have never voted for a Democrat in their lives. Right? How do we appeal to those people? And it goes back to, hey, listen, if Bill Clinton is in the Epstein files, I don't care.
Yeah.
Because it's got nothing to do with politics. It's got to do with protecting children and bringing criminals to justice and protecting the victims.
And then, that's a great general election question, but you've still got to get through the primary.
Yep.
And I know that a lot of people fell off with Kamala around the issue of Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be a huge one
still
going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what do we do? Like, do we keep... I mean, Bibi was on the track to being tried for being a war criminal. Mm-hmm. October 7th happens. Suddenly he is George Bush after 9/11.
Yeah.
And, like, where do you go from there?
And that's, and this is an area that I've put a lot of thought into because, I mean...
And then with money with AIPAC and all that, too,
Well... So let's face it. Let's be honest. Like Benjamin Netanyahu is Israel's Donald Trump.
Yeah,
he is corrupt. He is an inept leader, and he has really put Israel in a far more dangerous situation than it has ever been because of the level of conflict. Like his own Department of Justice is looking at now bringing him up on charges themselves.
Yeah,
and so I think we do have to be careful of saying, hey, Israel is an important ally. We don't want allies abandoning us because Donald Trump is incompetent.
Right.
And so let's look at what is the real threat here, right? How do we go after Hamas and make sure that we're supporting the Palestinian people and addressing the humanitarian crisis there? How are we pushing towards a two-state solution while preserving the rights of both people and reducing the influence of Hamas and ultimately Iran?
So you endorse a two-state solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people have seen that that's the only way to move forward with a peaceful way.
So it's not just an open-air prison there.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And it's again, and the human tragedy behind the whole thing is it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think, again, an area where, from a foreign policy perspective, this is an area where if we had a fully funded USAID, they could be going in there and providing that care directly. Like when you look,
that's just conspiracy.
Yeah. Well, and then you go back to, for all the flaws that existed within the Biden administration, right? At least Joe Biden made the attempt to use military force to go in there and deliver those supplies directly, right? That there are tools that we have at our disposal.
Yeah.
Right, and this is the thing, right? I'm not saying this is the perfect solution, but these are the things that we need to be talking about, And are you familiar that there is a Congressional Executive Commission that was formed around China when Nixon open trade or normalized trade relations with China in the 70s.
Yeah.
And this bipartisan organization has existed now for decades that looks at human rights violations in China, makes assessments on how China is operating, and that has found a way for us to successfully do these things, right? Why don't we have something for that for Israel as well? And to actually, when we look at one of the most complex, the Israel-Palestinian Middle East conflict is probably one of the most complex things that we've dealt with in 100 years. And mainly because it was started 100 years ago when the Europeans just like, oh, this looks like a good square.
Talk about spray paint in the middle of the night. Yeah.
And so why not start to bring that piece together and say, hey, this is probably one of the most serious geopolitical issues of our time.
Yeah.
Let's bring people together that are truly experts in this and dissect all the different components and be able to come to Congress and say, here's what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
Here's how we move towards an actual solution that is going to reduce the humanitarian crisis that's occurring. It's going to prevent terrorism on the other end, on the other side of the border.
Joe, we need to get out of this room. Why do people need to vote for you?
Honestly, I think it's because
Little League.
What's that?
Little League.
Little League.
Yeah.
Little League games.
Yeah.
No, it's because I think all of us inherently want someone that represents them that is actually going to make decisions for the community.
There will be less cranking.
There's not, yeah. No, it's. At the end of the day, right? As a member of, in this, okay, I'll brag a second here. So if you don't know this about me, this year I was nominated to serve as, I'm now the president-elect of the Colorado Springs Rotary Club.
Congrats.
Thank you. And so that means next year, in 2026, I'll be the president of the Rotary Club. And people have asked, they said, do you think you can do both? And I said, well, I think more than anything, that's exactly what we should have, right? Where should you be? Where should you get an opportunity to meet your representatives, right? Do you want to meet them at the El Paso Club, where you would find Crank and Lamborn? Or do you want to find your folks in these community service organizations that are out there actually doing the work? Okay. That's who I am. And I think that's why people should vote for me. This community needs someone who's actually going to represent this community, not special interests, not be a rubber stamp for either party.
Who lives here?
Who lives here? Who's lived here?
Who's lived here?
Whose kids go to school here?
Whose kids go to school here? How can we reach you? What's next? I guess just wait for the votes or show up.
No,
or what?
No.
Where's your website?
ReaganForColorado.com.
Spelled like Reagan.
Website. Spelled like Reagan.
Yeah.
But we pronounce it Reagan because my grandfather was a Democrat. He didn't want to be associated with him. Also, if this airs in time on the 22nd of August, we'll have the formal launch party as well. Nope, not going to air in time.
No, not that quick.
Oh well.
No. But it's
hopefully you've already
gone and you're listening to this now.
You're listening to this now.
Yeah.
You can also follow us.
Sally, you forgot your coat. Yeah.
Joe Reagan for CD5 on Facebook and all of our various social channels. You can find us all over. Or like I said, just walk downtown. You'll see me you'll see me every afternoon taking my walk. Sometimes I get the dog with me.
And sometimes you got a Jeep.
And sometimes I get the Jeep. Like today. It's hot outside.
It is so hot. Oh my God. Joe Reagan, congressional candidate, CD5, thank you for stopping by here to talk with me.
I had fun.
A dude who just talks about whatever.
Hey, it was a blast. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
See, wasn't that a great interview? I told you it would be. I told you. We had a lot of fun. And maybe someday we'll get to see the Epstein files and all that. It'd be great to flip the fifth. And there's so many benefits that Colorado Springsians are going to receive by having a candidate that will actually listen to them, whether they're Democratic or Republican, because the representative of this district should represent everyone, period. So before we get to the soapbox, let's go ahead and thank our people who supported the campaign and go into the credits.
Badly needed and long overdue. is part of the Studio 809 Community Podcast Network. These interviews are recorded at Studio 809 in the Next Us, a professional cooperative environment for small businesses in downtown Colorado Springs. Be sure to check out all the other fine podcasts at studio809podcasts.com, where you can find your new favorite local podcast. This show is produced by myself and Dave Gardner, with video directed by Dave Gardner. Show music is by Injection Site Reaction. Thank you guys. I'd like to give a thank you to Catherine Chukas and Ken Schauer, and a special thank you to Kelly Karnetsky for helping fund this second season of Binlo on Indiegogo.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and switch up my glasses. How's that sound? Sounds great. So let's talk about being a pedestrian. Now, I'm sitting in front of one of the 3 pedestrian tunnels that they built underneath North Carefree. This one in particular is special to me because I went under it hundreds of times as I would walk to Sabin Middle School every single morning. So every single morning that way, every single afternoon coming back. It's part of the pedestrian infrastructure over here. One thing that people are complaining about these days as the city is going around and fixing roads is that they're also fixing sidewalks. Now, I have been an avid pedestrian for a very long time. I am on the Citizens Transportation Advisory Board for a couple years now as an alternate, but because I'm passionate about walking, I'm passionate about bus transit, public transit. There's no bus line here. It is all walking. If you want to use the bus, you have to go all the way up to Barnes and access it there, or go back to Academy and do that. And so the idea is that you should be able to use a variety of different ways to get across our city. And that's really hard because it's so sprawled out. And obviously this is a big empty park, but that's for the residents to use. Now, one of the reasons why they're upgrading the sidewalks is because the city settled to make the ADA accommodations with sidewalks, and people who need accommodations, people with disabilities who need easier curb cuts, easier egress and ingress off of the sidewalks onto roads and stuff like that. The city has been on the hook to improve those for a very long time. That's sort of the story of the city, among other cities. Like, Colorado Springs is not alone in this regard, but in deferred maintenance, in holding off on making things right that should have been right a long time ago, or should have been built right in the first place, or were built right in the first place and then not maintained. This also helps with stormwater, allowing water to move about. Water doesn't have anywhere to go when it rains, so it's diverted to these irrigation channels alongside the gutters. And if those aren't properly addressed, if they aren't properly maintained, built or maintained, then that's a problem. So why not take care of stormwater? Why not take care of ADA access all in one trip? So you're seeing a lot of sidewalks and that around town as they're filling in potholes. They're also working to make sure that the sidewalks work good. Now, one thing about this, as I've already pointed out, is that this was my path to school. I used to walk to school. I walked to school, Sabin this way, Doherty the other way, for 5 years while I lived here. So over 5 years. And so it's important to me that people be able to walk to school. And it was, it was like a 20-minute walk or something like that, but it was safe. Aside from one crossing up near my house, I didn't have to use the signalization. I didn't have to cross a street. I didn't have to intersect with cars. There's some minor ones through the neighborhoods down through that way, on the way through these series of parks, but they're not anything like what you're seeing here. The problem with diverging your grades is that, yes, it's safer for pedestrians, but at the same time, it also gives much more access to cars. So while pedestrians get to walk under here, and again, it's only a trio of points, anything to the east this way is a crosswalk. It's at grade versus below grade or above grade with like a pedestrian bridge or something like that. Giving permission for pedestrians to be below grade like this means that cars have a pretty uninterrupted access point. And you may think as a driver, like, well, yeah, I want that. I don't want to stop for pedestrians, my goodness. But that also gives them plenty of opportunity to be dangerously fast. There are a number of spots along here where cars have crashed out because they were going too fast because the roads are wide. This is a 5-lane road. Drivers will start going fast. They see a straightaway. They go, I'm going to gun it because who cares? It's safe for me. There's nothing stopping me, nothing requiring me to pay attention to anything like that. And so not only is this more hazardous for pedestrians who may be up here, but they're hazardous for people who just live along the street. Unfortunately, this is an arterial where a lot of people have their driveways like right up butted against the arterial here. Like they're trying to get out, and here's this traffic that's supposed to be going 25, 30, 35, and they're doing 45, 50. It's absurd. It's scary. Circle has the same problem. Platte has the same problem. And pedestrians in town face like a number of issues. And I say this as someone who just a few years ago walked 50 kilometers around the city to raise money for NAMI here in Colorado Springs. As a pedestrian, you have to have safe facilities. It's something we was talking about with Steffi Hill a few episodes ago. You have to be able to cross safely. There are usually gaps on this road where you can get across and it's no problem. Improper crossings, not jaywalking. Jaywalking is a derogatory term created and popularized by not created by, but definitely popularized by the automobile industry to tell people they were dumb. I mean, the J is a derogatory prefix for dumb. Dumb walker for crossing the street. You're not dumb for this. Before the car was invented, these roads were designed for people, although granted they weren't this wide or straight. As a pedestrian, I run into things like people making right turns on red, which is legal, but people are pulling up, blocking the crosswalk, and then as someone who walks along the inside course of a block, so the left side against traffic, what happens is that drivers will be making their right turn, but they're not looking for me back over here. They're looking this way. And only this way. They are like psychologically conditioned to only look in the direction that car traffic is coming. And so a lot of times I'm sitting there like, well, I got to sit here and just chill for a bit as cars change, as someone starts to pay attention. This also creates situations in places like middle schools where you have parents that sit in the waiting line for up to an hour with their cars running and ACs blaring as they're waiting for kids to come out, rather than letting their kids just walk to school. The thing is, walkability and the ability to move about your city on foot is important. And unfortunately, people don't tend to recognize why this is a problem unless they're actually walking it. It's my hope and my dream that even as the environment is already built, and it's very hard to change an environment that's already built, is that the city becomes more available to those who don't want to drive, to those who don't want to be dropped off and picked up. Like, again, for 5 years, I walked to Sabin, I walked to Doherty, and I did that summer, winter, obviously not summer because, we were out of school, but springtime, fall time, hot, cold, wet, dry. We're losing that resilience as people, as city dwellers, when our parents are picking us up and dropping us off on top of all the traffic that creates. Like we complain about traffic, it's because we're being driven everywhere. It sucks. And you lose so much of this experience. So much of my memories here are tied to physically walking along these paths, physically walking along these trails, going through that kind of scary tunnel there, which is dark, not illuminated at all, and tagged with, some graffiti. That can scare people until you've actually gone through it, or gone through it a couple times. It's like, oh, whatever. It's not a big deal. There's nothing that we can change overnight, right? It took us decades to get to this. This stuff is old. North Carefree is old. But if we start putting in more, and we already have, to some extent, we have already started implementing things like, again, fixing the sidewalks, again, adding bike trails, bike lanes, stuff like that. The more we do stuff like that, incrementally, and hopefully with a leader who has more of the political will to want to make it happen beyond just like, well, we're going to add more bike ride stations, to change the infrastructure and how it's used and to discourage car use. The thing is, that doesn't just make life better for pedestrians like me who want to use these tunnels, who want more safer transit, who want calmed roads, who want dieted roads, right? Making pedestrians' life easier makes life easier for bicyclists. It makes it easier for people who drive cars and trucks and stuff like that. So that's my soapbox. Love your family. Love your friends. Love your city. Free Palestine. Let's get out of here.